This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi on the Tombigbee River called Columbus. And sometimes I write about the rest of the state. This episode is about the Lincoln home on 3rd Avenue South in Columbus. The Lincoln home on 3rd Avenue South is just behind the Amsey Love home, and it is a simple Gothic/Greek revival raised cottage built by Barney Burton Lincoln. Lincoln was a land speculator born in North Carolina. He first came to Alabama when he moved into the area, where he married Rebecca Norman in 1834 in Marengo County. Lincoln held a significant land grant acreage in neighboring Noxubee County, Mississippi, down in the Black Belt Prairie, just across the Tombigbee River. By 1846, Barney, his wife Rebecca, and their 6 children, Barney Jr., James, Armstead, Henrietta, Susanna, and Cicero, lived in their Columbus home. The original kitchen, the well, and the family dining room were on the cooler ground floor. The bedrooms and parlor were on the upper floor. In modern times, a new kitchen and dining room were on the upper floor. 2 large porches graced the front and back of the home. A high sweeping staircase leads to the street from the columned porch. On either side of the front door is cobalt blue etched Venetian glass. The original Gothic and Greek revival lines of the house make it a comfortable home with much of its original elements still obvious in the wide heart pine flooring, the stairs, and the elegantly simple railings, as well as the heavy doors with rim locks and foundry cast doorknobs. It is a well-loved home that would remain in the Lincoln home for over 100 years and 3 generations. By 1860, Barney Sr., Barney Jr., James, and Armstead Lincoln have all left Columbus and are found living in California per census records and voter registration records. Barney Sr., age 45, and Barney Jr., age 20, lived in San Francisco, and the father worked as a barkeeper, and Jr. is listed as a fruiterer. James and Armstead are found living in Santa Rosa, California, working as farmers. James and Armstead will settle into farming and ranching for the rest of their lives there in Santa Rosa. Barney Sr. remains a publican and is at one point brought up on manslaughter charges for tossing a drunk out of his Magnolia Saloon in 1874. The man apparently landed on the back of his head and dies from a combination of alcohol poisoning and concussion, according to the Santa Barbara Times. By 1880, Barney Sr. was active in state and local politics. He's eventually a state delegate to the California Central Democratic Committee and is elected to the state legislature. He is quite the vivant and is listed in the 1890s on society pages, often visiting Lake Arrowhead Resort for weekends with his friend James Proctor, one of the founders of Procter & Gamble of Ohio. Barney Sr. will die in 1898 of pneumonia in the Santa Rosa County Hospital and is buried there in Santa Rosa, California. All 4 of the California Lincolns are buried in Santa Rosa, and no records indicate they ever returned home to Columbus for visits. Barney's wife, Rebecca, who remained in Columbus, lived out the rest of her life with her son Cicero and his family before dying in 1897, believing the whole time that she was a widow and not abandoned. Cicero, Retta, Henrietta, their mother, Rebecca, and a relative, Patsy Bartholomew, lived in the Columbus home according to the 1860 census. Retta is listed as age 12, and Cicero Leonidas is 15, and they are both listed as students. Older sister Susanna, by that time, had married W.I. Turnbow in 1860 in Columbus and moved to Choctaw, Alabama. By the 1880 census, Rebecca is listed as a widow, living in the same home with her son Cicero and his young family. Cicero, born in 1844, had enlisted in the Confederate Army and served with the 14th Mississippi Infantry on enlisted on the 20th of April, 1862. Later, he would serve again with distinction, this time with the U.S. Army in the Spanish-American War, where he was a captain in the 2nd Mississippi Infantry Company D. After the Civil War, Cicero returned to Columbus, married Texana or Tessie Alexander in 1869, where he would eventually let me try that again. After the Civil War, Cicero returned to Columbus and married Texana Tessie Alexander in 1869. Eventually, he would be elected mayor and work as an attorney until his death in 1939. Tessie and Cicero had 7 children: Norman Lee, Alma Pearl, Otis Ivanhoe, Atwell Thomas, Burton Alexander, Sue May, and Lon. Tessie was the daughter of John Madison Alexander, a postmaster and justice of the peace, as well as a partner in Alexander and Kennedy Merchants. Tessie's maternal grandfather was the president of Princeton University at that point, Princeton College in New Jersey. Education would be a strong point in their family. Alma Pearl, unfortunately, would die in 1874 at the age of 2 during the yellow fever outbreak that decimated so many Southern families in the fecund Mississippi summers. Otis Ivanhoe would die in 1878 at the age of 4 of the same horrible disease. The other children would grow into adulthood and attend university. The boys attended the University of Alabama, and Sue May attended the Industrial Institute and College in Columbus, along with her sister Henrietta. Sons Atwell and Norman would eventually move to St. Louis, Missouri, and marry sisters. Atwell would join the Army during World War I, serving as a captain commanding a machine gun company in the 354th Infantry, 84th Division. He was killed at the Battle of Mahel Salient in France and is buried in St. Louis. Cicero's wife, Tessie, would die in 1920, and he would remain in the home until his death at the age of 94. His son, Lonnie, would then continue to live there until his death in 1977, when the house would have finally be lived in by a new family. Lonnie would be the 3rd and final generation to live in the house. I often babysat for the new family that bought the house and spent many hours in the upstairs, which would be considered the main floor, playing dolls and reading book after book with their daughter, whom I babysat. One evening, while reading to their daughter, a lady in a white cotton, old-fashioned, high-necked summer lace dress with her hair piled on her head, Gibson girl style, walked through the closed door frame into the entry hall where we sat reading. She walked into the front room on the right, which was a formal parlor, and she vanished. I checked the upstairs and found no sign of her. I did not have the courage to go down the stairs to look for her that night. I did not say anything to the homeowners either, as I thought perhaps I'd just imagined it. A few weeks later, I was there, babysitting again, and I sat in the parlor studying after my little charge had gone to bed. I was reading my notes over for a chemistry test and was working some problems out on a notebook in my lap when I looked up to see a dark form hovering in the far corner of the room up above the fireplace. It was a hazy and indistinct form, and I thought perhaps soot had escaped the boarded-up chimney. but I knew that wasn't possible. The form hovered for a minute, and I could just make out a dark top hat on the top of the form. For some reason, the floating top hat made me giggle nervously, and the form immediately evaporated. I still said nothing to the homeowners. Summer came, and I was called by the family to watch their little girl several nights in a row, as the parents were busy with a church festival and related social events. The little girl had gone to bed on one of these nights after her bath, and we had read our usual stack of golden books before she conked out after a full day playing outside. I went to the living room to read whatever latest sci-fi novel had me absorbed in the moment. I had just settled back into the same chair I usually sat in, so I could see the bedroom door where my little charge slept. I could also see the dining room and the staircase to the bottom floor. I had several chapters into the book and thought I saw someone in white in the dining room. What is she doing up? I got up to see if my little charge was headed to the kitchen for a drink. No one was there. I went to her door and could see her in the glow of her little fairy nightlight, fast asleep in her bed. Huh, I must be seeing things, I thought, as I shut the door and went back to my book. No sooner had I sat down than I heard a small child crying. I hopped up, went back to the front bedroom, and realized the crying was coming from the middle room, not the front room. I went in the middle room, flipping on the light, and the crying abruptly stopped. No one was there. I hurried back to the front bedroom, but the little girl I was watching was still zonked and showed no signs of having moved. I must be tired. I went back to the parlor and sat down with my book, contemplating calling my best friend to keep me company. This was a bit too weird. I talked myself out of it. Ghosts aren't real. They're just spirits stuck on the wrong side trying to live their lives. Really wasn't afraid of a ghost, or was I? I grabbed my book and went to the dining room. I turned on the lamp on the sideboard and sat down at the head of the table. I laid the book on the 12-foot Duncan Fife table and waited quietly. I did not sit long before a man in gray creased trousers, round-toed black boots, a waistcoat, and shirt sleeves walked through the wall into the room and buried his mustached face in his hands. He seemed overcome with grief as he walked across the dining room to the top of the stairs before evaporating in the amber glow of the dining room lamp. The room grew suddenly colder, and I felt overcome with a heavy sadness for a brief moment. A few minutes later, the homeowners came in, and I felt compelled to tell them of the dining room spirit. They looked at each other and then shrugged their shoulders. Oh, that is Cicero Lincoln. 2 of his children died from yellow fever in that other room, apparently. They seemed nonplussed by it all. Well, have y'all seen the man float by the ceiling over the fireplace in the parlor? I asked, unsure how they'd react. Wearing a ridiculous top hat? One of them asked. That's the one, I chuckled. We think that's Barney Lincoln Sr. He was a bit of a scoundrel. Apparently he abandoned his wife and younger children. The owner seemed well acquainted with him. He went to California and never came back, or at least not in body. Have you seen the woman in the ankle-length white dress with her hair piled up high in a bun carrying a hat? We're pretty sure that's his former wife, Rebecca, that he abandoned. Yes, only I didn't notice a hat. Relief swept over me. Well, sometimes she carries a basket of flowers instead of a hat. We chatted well into the night about the ghosts in the house. They took me to the ground floor to see the location of the well where Cicero Lincoln hid a former enslaved man named Robert Gleed who was being hunted down by an angry mob. Does the ghost of Gleed ever appear out of the well? I asked. The well was concreted over in the 1930s or 40s. It looked undisturbed. Lordy, no, and let's keep it that way, said the owner. The Lincoln home was later sold and became a popular bed and breakfast. Guests report seeing and hearing unexplained people in the house. It's for sale again, and if you're in the market for a haunted house, this one is guaranteed to fit the bill. I want to thank you for coming on my tour of Columbus, Mississippi and the Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time.